Hey, good morning, everyone. This morning, I want to tell a story about how the transcripts tell part of the tale. This comes out of a conversation I had with somebody who is telling me basically I'm a liar and that all of my transcripts and everything tell the story. And that's partially true. Transcripts do tell a story, but they don't tell the whole story. Because if this person had looked at some of the other things that I have produced, the chats, and my willingness to share the chats, but not to throw them out there because of what the trolls have done in slicing and dicing up things and repackaging them to say something other than they actually did. So I have the transcripts, and anybody wants to come by and see them. And of course, if you're far away, that's regrettable. I'm willing to talk to you about them. And the reason I'm willing to do this is not because I want to revisit all this, but because it's important for people to understand what's going on with these things and what is happening and what is not. And the transcripts are a piece of the puzzle, but they're only a piece. They tell a story. They don't tell the story, okay? They are the equivalent of a book report, all right? Remember, let's say that you had to read in high school 3 books and you had to pick a theme and you had to run that theme through, and then you wrote a book report about it. And then people say, well, I don't have to read the 3 books because I read the book report. Nobody would really believe that if you're actually thinking, but that's exactly how this works. So that's why I've gone into a lot of the chats, and then I've been challenged by trolls to come out and put all the chats out there. And when I have put some of that out there, I have found those on other sites on Discord and some others where they have Telegram. Not me personally, I'm not on those sites, but others have shared with me, people who are looking at these sites for me, are pulling some of this stuff and sharing it with me. And of course, they twist it entirely around. There is a real heady belief that if somebody is convicted, that they absolutely must be guilty, and that's all there is to it. Certainly the legal profession wants you to believe that, and that makes sense. A lot of times they're right, but they're also wrong, and they don't want you to pay much attention to when they're wrong, because what it does is it undermines confidence in that system. And we're seeing epic undermining of confidence when we see some of the things the U.S. Supreme Court has done to undercut the lower courts. But back to the story. So I have said and taken great pains to read into the record here on my channel and, various chats that are targeted in certain areas where trolls have called me a liar. I have debunked the affidavit that they used to kick in my door on the 26th of July, 2018. After 4 days of me being in jail where they could have done it, and they did that because they couldn't find any evidence. And of course, when they did that, they also didn't find any evidence. So no evidence of wrongdoing in my car, in my house, on my devices, right? So what did they do? What they did was they conflated several chats with different people, and 2 fake people and 1 real person. And the real person who was of age, who was sexual talk, and they wove that into the other 2 and said, aha, they're the same person. And the judge bought it, okay? We argued against it, but the judge's response was, do you have anybody here from Verizon who can, verify the veracity of these accounts, even though it has Verizon blazoned on the top of it? Because, of course, judges are not perfect. And they have prejudices, and they go into these, if they go into these because they're a former prosecutor or defense attorney or whatever, they come in with a perspective. Of course, trolls listening to this would say, well, you're just going to say that. Okay, well, President Biden, you'll recall, nominated to the court this first black lady. Okay. And why did he do that? I'm sorry, I've forgotten her name. Jackson, I think, is part of her last name. I'm sorry, the name escapes me at the moment, but it's easily verified. You can look it up. And why did he do that? Because she was a former defense attorney. And he wanted to balance it, somebody who has litigation experience from the standpoint of the defense, from the standpoint of the little guy. So don't tell me that, oh, judges somehow get to the court and they get a halo over their head and everything that they want to talk about is purely having to do with the law, because that's not how it works. Anybody who's been in a court of law knows that that is not how it actually works. The prosecution has tremendous amount of power, the defense much, much less so, because supposedly the prosecution is representing the people. But actually, what the prosecution is representing is a select group of people who are weaponizing certain aspects of the law, like in sex offense cases, which are very emotional, they're very raw, they're very difficult. They deal with people who really do want to hurt children. But they also net a number of people who aren't ever trying to do that. And that's the problem, separating those two parts out. So I just wanted to give a shout out to, understanding how these cases work. Okay. You have chats and you have then that is part of evidence. And then you have the story at the end in the transcripts. And who writes this story, by the way? Well, the prosecution largely writes the story, because the one who wins, which is usually the prosecution in sex cases, they get to write the story. And the story is whatever they want to emphasize in the story. I have read transcripts of cases that I attended, and what was written there is not what happened. They take this or that and they edit it out. And, I was a journalist for a number of years. Whenever you're writing a story, whether it be a book report or a news article, you are editing. And that's one of the arguments that is used with reporting, is that you already, because you're a human being and you can only absorb so much, and you leave details out, especially if they tell you you have this much space to write your article, right? So many, it used to be when I was in print newspaper work, they would say you have so many column inches, and they would cut out sections. But what was printed became the story. And unfortunately, the story leaves out details. So bear in mind, you have the transcripts, which are written from the chats. They don't include all the information from the chats. And the key issue in my case is that they conflated, that is, they mixed together chat information to make it appear one thing. Look, I've said, come on by, I'll show you all the chats. I was going to read a lot of them into the record here weeks ago, because trolls have taken the last part of the conversation and they've taken it completely out of context, because there's a first part of the conversation that is 2 weeks before. And there you see over and over again, I'm not interested in meeting. No, I will not go to your house. No, I will not meet with you. Okay. And there's a reason why it was twisted around, because it goes toward their narrative, the narrative of the people who want to win. And that's really the challenge. That's where the bitterness comes in from people who have been caught in not only these things, but, you can go to family court, you can go to circuit court. You have, the loser doesn't like to lose. That's certainly true. But what's sad is very often, at least in sex cases, the loser loses and the truth never really comes out. And then, of course, you have these random people like this guy, Skanging Joyle, or whatever the hell his name was, who came after me this morning, who they don't know me. They only know me through the transcripts, and you're not going to get the full answer. And when I say, hey, come on by, Now, having said that, unfortunately, I've had police in my house 3 times, and my records are all over the place, and some are missing. I can't find them. I did have a flood when I was in jail. That makes it even harder to establish it. Fortunately, I've read, typed some into the record. My book is really long, and I'm trying desperately to narrow it down with the little time I have, because I also have to work and I have to survive. But the record isn't what they're saying just in the transcript. You have to understand, when I find all of these, I'm going to read them into the record. But you have to understand what you're looking at is not the full record. You're not looking at in the full record. And even though the final transcript is informed by the record, it doesn't include everything. And if you're reading in and you're skipping through to look for the juicy parts, you might miss where it says the judge says, no, we're not going to allow that into evidence. No, we're not going to let this out. No, we're not going to include that. Or even at the more granular level, that the other side, it's amazing. I've done videos on this. Cops lose things that can be exculpatory. In other words, that could get the person off. It's corrupted. It's damaged. They can't find it. They've loaned it to somebody, and that other law enforcement agency has lost it. I mean, the whole panoply of the excuses you've heard for cops who are suddenly very clumsy when it's convenient to be so. So you have that element too. So that's why one of the reasons that you don't judge in these cases too. Part of the evidence, I'll close with this, is I've said over and over again, where are all the former children, current children, or their parents coming forward to demand justice, like they did with the Larry Nassar cases and things like that I have been equated with, by the way, or worse yet, the worst cases where somebody has done terrible things and murdered a child at the end. All right, they've conflated that with me and other people who are in these proactive stings as victims of the police. What about those cases? Why don't you have any interest in the fact that, in my case, and again, I keep referring to my case because I know it better than other people's cases, so forgive me, but with others as well. You spent 30 years dealing with children in 5 states, and there was never an unfounded complaint, of abuse, much less a founded, that is, one with evidence case. How come? Where do you have? I mean, in the years since I left a formal teaching at the high school level, I've run into 2 or 3 of my students who said, "Oh, Mr. Asian, we didn't really believe that about you, and we're sad that this has happened to you." And these are people, some of them, one in particular, who saw me at a store, and he had bailed out of my class because he didn't want to work in Latin too. And he greeted me very warmly. And I knew he looked somewhat familiar. He remembered me, and he remembered me fondly, not as somebody he hated. Okay, so these are evidences too, folks, that you need to keep in mind. So anyway, I'm now rambling. I'm almost at 13 minutes here, so I'm going to sign off. But just bear in mind that there's a lot more to the story than you think.